Welcome to How to Belong, the podcast that delves into the human quest to find a sense of belonging in what can often feel like a lonely world. Join us as we talk to guests who've navigated their own unique paths, what we like to call their hero journeys, from feeling like they don't fit in, to the profound realisation that true belonging can only ever be found from within. I'm Naomi E. Lloyd, and this is the How to Belong podcast. Hello and welcome back to another lovely episode of How to Belong. Today, I'm actually recording late in the evening UTech time because I've managed to pin down. I'm a bit of a fangirl of this lovely lady. She's called Alex, and I'll introduce you to her properly in a minute. But Alex lives in Seattle, and she's got a really cool podcast. And she's agreed to be a guest on How to Belong. So who is she? Well, Alex Alexander is she's somebody who truly understands what it means to build belonging. So I mentioned a cool podcast. It's actually called Friendship IRL. She's built a global community of listeners via this podcast who, like her, believe that friendships aren't just a nice to have, they're absolutely essential. And I totally agree. But Alex has got a really powerful story. As she puts it in her own words, I didn't have a healthy support system growing up, so I built one out of friends. Love that. Now, she's dedicated to helping others do the same because she believes that creating a strong support system is the ultimate form of self-care. So without further ado, Alex, thank you for coming on to the How to Belong podcast.
So much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I've been waiting for this one for quite a while, and it's great that our timings work. We've just been discussing before we came on what the time difference was, because you're in Seattle and I was just being a real typical UK person talking about Grey's Anatomy and all my sort of my references to Seattle.
Grey's Anatomy is a great intro to Seattle. It's very similar. The only thing I will say is, you probably feel this way in the UK, actually. They really show, that like downpour rain. And we get a lot of rain here, but it's normally just like misty or drizzly. Like very rarely does it downpour the way they always show. That's the one thing where I'm always like, that's false.
Also, it doesn't help that the infamous film Sleepless in Seattle, Tom Hanks makes a massive thing about the rain there as well. But I can see that it's sunshine behind you there. So we're debunking that one. Right, let's get on to the subject of friendship. So where do we start? I've been listening to your podcast and you talk a lot about friendships as the foundation of belonging. It's a long story, but I really would love the listeners to, if you don't mind, take us back to sort of your origin story and what sparked your passion for building community and finding belonging in friendships. Over to you. A huge question for you there, Alex.
Well, I'm pretty good at this point at narrowing this down and giving it concise. So I think we don't have to take up the whole episode with it. People can go to my website. If you want a deeper story, it is out there. But basically, as you mentioned, I grew up with a pretty terrible family of origin situation. I didn't know it at the time, but I definitely was pretty lonely. Like I was on my own, and naturally I started seeking out other forms of support, friends, community, teachers, coaches, neighbors. Like looking back, I just did it. And I think it's really because I didn't have any other option. Like we need support to survive. So I just instinctively did this. For a long time, I wouldn't have said that. I wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't have acknowledged it. Like I really did it unconsciously. And it wasn't really until I got to my maybe mid 20s that I really started to realize what I had built for myself. And at that point, I think one of the biggest wake-up calls was a lot of people, like I would talk about the friendships I had, the community I have, the way we showed up for each other. And a lot of people would look at me and be like, that's not possible. You can't have that. Like friends don't show up in that way. Friends don't support you like that. You can't have that many friends who do this for you. I was like, what do you mean? Because I
Yeah.
do. So I just really assumed that everybody had this. So at that point, I really started looking at my own friendships, my community, and trying to understand, like, what was I doing differently? And that's really what has led me here. It's not that I ever meant to do this. I just did it.
When you're in survival mode, and I haven't spoken about this really on my podcast, but it seemed like the right time to just give a little glimpse into why I relate to this a lot, because not as young as you, because I know, if you don't mind me saying, you very, very sadly lost your mum when you were so young at 13.
Yeah, I
And
was
I
13.
really relate to that survival instinct kicking in, looking for teachers, looking for the community, looking for parents or friends or relatives. Not in the same way, but when I was a little bit older, my parents split up, and for various different reasons I won't go into, but I did actually really have to do something similar. And mine was with godparents. And are you a godmother?
Yeah.
Is that something that is, I don't know if you use that term.
I call it, yes, we do use the term godmother, but I would say, like, I'm a bonus adult for a number of kiddos.
That's a brilliant term. Yes. And I mean, it was a joke almost at the time, in a nice way, when my godparents stepped in to help me. That when you agree to do that, when the baby's in your arms in the church and you're going to the party afterwards, and it's a nice thing to do, you never expect that you actually will have to step up, but sometimes you do. So that is something, that idea of survival and chosen family is something that I feel really strongly about. So when my children were born, I was, I think they've got what I call star friends, and they've got godparents, but just hoping there's some sort of collateral there in case of chaos. But just at this, I just wanted to say, I think it's amazing what you're doing, because opening up this conversation about chosen family and building community is huge. I wonder if perhaps, if you haven't been in that situation, it probably is hard to understand. Do you come across that in the conversations on the podcast?
I think before I started talking about this as openly as I have, I assumed that people who maybe had a really strong family of origin situation wouldn't understand, that they would push back. And I can specifically think of some friends, actually, that I just couldn't imagine them ever really understanding. But what I have found is the more that I talk about it, the more I'm honest. And I don't mean dumping all my past stories, but just even so simply as saying, like, hey, I really don't have the support system that other people have. And you, my friend, are part of my core support system. Like, you're one of the first people I would call. It has been so beautiful to watch my friends believe me and accept that. And every doubt I had has gone away. The other thing I would say is, like, the more that I talk about this on the podcast and on stages and in my writing and the on your podcast, the places I talk about it, it's not an all or nothing situation. So what often happens is, although I was really at rock bottom in my way, I think when I start to speak about it, a lot of people maybe realize that whether it is that they have no support in any way, or maybe they just have no support, they're at rock bottom in, like, one way. Something that comes to mind is new parents who thought they would have this village and realize that the people in their life aren't showing up the way they expected, and they feel at a complete loss. And so I do think that a lot more people can identify with this in one way or another than I ever thought possible. Like, I definitely went into this conversation with my guards up, expecting a ton of pushback, and I've gotten very little, especially the more we talk about it.
Well, the one thing I want to pick up on, first of all, is you said about how beautiful it's been for your friends to hear you refer to them as chosen family, as in that way, and that sort of exchange of honesty and authenticity in your friendship has clearly given it something really quite special that not everybody will necessarily think that they should or could or in a friendship. Because when we think about, I think I'm hearing this more and more now, platonic love, which is friendship. We love our friends and it's platonic love. They're incredibly important. So why would we not have more honest conversations about just how important it is? Because when you're married to somebody or you're a partner and you're living with them, all the systems and the metrics are put in place, but they're not with friendships. And your friendships are vary, don't they? They vary in the way that you interact with them and the friends that you would turn to at different times, to different occasions. But through this podcast, actually, How to Belong, every now and again, I'm kind of leaving little breadcrumbs for my friends to pick up. And I say, you might hear yourself in this podcast episode, and I can see you smiling. I bet you do the same. And I just love the idea that maybe we can start being more open and saying, I love you, thank you for being there, and I hope you know I'll always be there for you. Things like that. I think it's such a great feeling when you get that feedback from somebody and you give it to them as well.
For anybody that's nervous out there, if you want to, I guess, take this one step at a time, you want to like slowly enter this space of being honest about how much someone means to you and telling them that you believe they're chosen family to you, like that's the way you see this relationship. Something I would remind people is it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Yeah.
It can feel really intense to like, hey, Naomi, you are my chosen family. It's like, what does that mean? That feels like a lot of responsibility. That can feel vulnerable, right? That can be a lot. Maybe you're not there. That's fine. You can just say to someone, hey, I would like to put you as my emergency contact. In fact, a real story, a friend of mine who is somebody I've been friends with for a long time, but I wouldn't say is like, I don't know, like my most present friend, my most, I would call her all the time in an emergency kind of friend. And we understand that about our friendship. If she hears this, she's not going to be offended. But she asked me one day, like, hey, will you be my kid's emergency contact at school? And in my mind, it was like, wow, okay. So in a crisis where your kids are, like you're really trusting me, right? If that moment arises, that you think I can handle that situation, that your kids would trust me, that I would keep them safe. In my mind, that is like a piece of kind of that chosen family. And it was like a very direct ask where I have an understanding and kind of like my role for her and her family. So it doesn't need to be all encompassing. You could just tell someone, hey, I'd love to give you a key to my house. So if something ever happened to me or my house or whatever, you could go in and I really trust you with that. And that could be it. It could be simple and you could build from there.
There's so many more terms that you see bandied about now about friendships, like BFF and ride or die friends. And
I mean, I do not love the term best friend because what does that even mean to you versus me? Have you talked about this with your best friend? Like, what are the expectations that come with that? I think a lot of the societal narrative about the term best friend is this idea of like, we will do anything for each other. I will drop anything for you. You come above everyone else. And then that creates all these moments where if that friend is really not the friend you should go to for a certain piece of advice, like work advice, for example, they don't work in the same field as you, they don't understand, and they're really hanging on to this societal belief that they should be like the first call always, they may not be the right call. And we would hope that our friend understands that. But if they're really clinging on to that belief that they should be the end all be all friend number one in every scenario, it can be exhausting. It can be exhausting. Also, I like to flip it and say, if somebody calls me their best friend and then the expectation is I'm supposed to drop everything all the time, like, I don't know if I want that. That doesn't leave a lot of space for for me and other people. So that's all to say. I don't love the term best friend. And what I often ask people is like, best friend for what?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Best friend for what? But just like when we were kids, your lives are so small. If you think about it, right? You and your best friend maybe live in the same neighborhood, you go to the same school, you go to some of the same after school activities. You don't have all the complex problems and nuances that we have as adults. We need more diversity in our lives, in our support systems. No adult best friend is living an exact parallel life to you the way we often were as kids, and therefore cannot be the best support for every area of your life. So that's where I come in with like, best friend for what? You know, I'm sure you had a best friend at your hen party that was that best friend when you were a child, and somebody who really saw you through those younger 20 years and maybe certain relationships or moves or career changes. Maybe there's certain people today in the present day that are better, quote unquote, like best friends for your career goals versus your fitness goals. You know, there is a space for probably all these people. And if we just say they're my best friend,
Yeah.
that cuts out all the nuance.
Cuts it down. It makes it too black and white and puts a lot of pressure on. I mean, you know the infamous film Bridesmaids, when they're all battling over who's that's also what makes me think of this conversation now. And it's hard to manage. I think in reality, clearly, you just have to look at Instagram and listen to other podcasts, that friendship is something that people are talking a lot more about. And also, one of the big ones is that we need to be more flexible with our concept of friendship. That friends for a reason, friends for a season, friends for life. I mean, that one kind of gets me into a bit of a spin sometimes, because then you start trying to actually categorize it, and I'm not sure you can all the time. And or should you? What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know how deep you've dug into my stuff, but I have a framework. Okay. There's a lot of stuff out there. I have a framework out there talking about the different types of people in your life, and it includes everything from your family of origin, your chosen family, your community, your acquaintances, and then there's 4 types of friends on there. It also includes your past relationships. But when I look at friendships, when I sat down, because I did spend an extensive thousands of hours really trying to pick this apart, I ended up with 4 categories. So, you know, you have your community, you meet people, certain people are acquaintances, you have a little more like awareness of them, their name, maybe some details, things like that. But then the 4 types of friends are familiar friends, which are people where you don't actively go and seek them out, but you do see them often. So these could be like friends of friends or the people you're closest to in your class, things like that. You do have some like understanding, like you seek them out in a group situation. Then I have what's called your defined friends. And those are, those are people where you have really one connection point. So they are your mom friends, your dad friends, your work friends, your running friends, right? You kind of have this one space that you feel comfortable with them. And you often find yourself referring to them in that way. Then I have what's called your present friends, which are the people that you're really living life with right now. So that could be digitally, but you're really in like pretty constant contact about your lives. You're doing a variety of things together. You're connected in more than one way. And then I have your historic friends. And these are friendships where at one point you were probably present friends. You could have been defined friends. And you aren't, again, like as present in each other's life. It's more historic. You depend a lot on your memories and the details you know about each other rather than consistently being together, like in the day-to-day type thing. And the reason I brought that up, like the reason I changed that is because, I don't know, like friends for a reason, in my mind, that can fit in multiple categories, and that doesn't like quite do a service to maybe certain friends that you're like really present with, but they're also a friend for a reason. Anyways, it's just how my brain works. But that's
No,
what I
I
made
think
up.
everything you said makes sense, and I like everything you're saying there. But you're right, you've got to have the nuance with it, because the friend for a reason, the person's role, or they could sort of flow between the different categories almost. So, for example, when my mum died, nearly 4 years ago now, I, and it's something I've really had to think about a lot, and it was a big reason for setting up this podcast, because I don't have a big strong network of an origin family. Yes, I'm married with 2 lovely children, but there's still a little girl inside of me that constantly want to knock on the door of my old home, and I often go there in my dreams, and I think I always will sometimes, but and just want to go back to something that felt safe and nice. And yeah, you'd think at my age I would have gotten over it, but maybe, that's always going to be the case, who knows, but in a better place with it now. But I wondered if some of my expectations that I had on some of, not all, because there were some incredible friends that came and still are incredible, chosen family. But there were some people that I think I did perhaps place too much expectation on. Oh, I'm not sure. Grief makes you a bit different to your normal self anyway, emotionally. But what I did find there was that the friends that I'd known since I was a child, they were the ones that really understood how horrendously painful it was, and how big this loss was. And I think I expected that the friends that I had, that I was living life with day to day, where I live, and some, even as close as I was to them, they weren't there when I was a girl with my mum. They didn't see the start of it. So how could they really understand how big that loss was? Because they didn't know how. I can tell them the story of a glass of, or 2 of wine, but if you haven't lived it, whereas one of my best friend from I will say best friend from when I was a child. She cried with me many times. She rang me every day. She said we need to put a plan together. I mean, she lives. This isn't probably very far for somebody living in America, but it's a good 4.5 hour drive. That's a long way in the UK. That's a long way to not be near somebody, and yet she did that every day. And, other friends that I've known since I was a child, again, they cried in a different way for me, and I can see that now. I can see that. Putting everybody in the expectation of everybody to really get just how painful this was probably unrealistic. Does that make sense? Can you relate to that?
Yeah, I have another framework for that, and I'm not going to go into it because we don't need to spend my whole episode. But for anybody that wants that, like, go look for my roots framework. If you listen to my podcast, I think it's episode 12, but it's all over my website. But that makes total sense to me, because you have those like firsthand connections with your childhood friend. Like, they knew your mom and they also are grieving. Like, it's just different than somebody present. But I think such a big problem out there is we don't have the language for this stuff. We don't have the understanding for it. There's a lot of like, why aren't my friends doing X, Y, and Z, right? Because we have these blanket expectations. And so much of, I guess, my early work, like when I very first started doing this, was just trying to understand why. And that's where that roots framework comes in, and the wheel of connection framework that I talked about earlier. I think it helps understand that expectations have to be different, and some blanket term of like, they're my oldest friend, they're my closest friend, they're my whatever friend, that doesn't really help you understand the way that somebody might show up for you.
I also picked up on some of your conversations on your podcast. He's smiling at me now. Where's she going to go now? You talk a little bit about how we can feel grief sometimes when thinking about friendship. Our phones are always pinging up old memories for us without us even asking to. And some friends will drift away. Some you may have broken up with, actually had a breakup with. It is a thing, friendship breakup, again, something that people are talking about a lot. Or it just be that you're not with them anymore. And I think you referred to it as friends that have got lost along the way. I think that was something that you mentioned.
Yeah.
I thought it was a really powerful episode that I heard you explaining the grief around that and being more compassionate with ourselves about understanding it is a grief. And we actually, as human beings, let's face it, we're grieving all the time in our own little ways, whether it's the fact that your children have got a little bit older and that stage has gone, or that all of those
Yeah.
things, but we don't necessarily realise that's really common in friendship too. Have you had any experience of that, or where did your reason for bringing that one into such a powerful episode come from?
I've had so many experiences of small griefs and big griefs, you know. I think that something about friendships is we often don't see our friends. You might, and I love this for you if you do, but so many people don't see their friends every day, or they live far apart, but they try and stay in touch, digitally. Or honestly, I think a lot of people also have very simple friendships, and I use simple to just say that they might revolve around just one area of your life. And it's actually incredibly important. That friendship is really supporting you in that really vital area of your life, right? Another parenting friend, somebody at work, somebody who understands your grief if you're grieving. But they may not be this all encompassing thing. Whatever type of friendship it is, they are constantly changing. And it's kind of hard to be present and notice all the changes. Most people are not doing that. And I think they get caught off guard often. So, an example of that would be if that parent friend that you have really leaned on through the early years of your child's life, your kids were born at the same time, that was the person you texted at 3 a.m. or you asked if you should call the pediatrician. If that person, let's say, lived down the street from you and now you've been friends for 2 to 3 years, you aren't fully, connected in other areas of life. If that person tells you that they're moving across the world, you're probably going to be sad. Not to say you can't still message them, but it's probably just going to be different and it might drift away. And a lot of people aren't acknowledging that. They aren't as present, right? A lot of people just brush it off. It's like, oh, well, friendships change. And they do, but you're allowed to spend the time that's appropriate. And that might just be 5 minutes of sitting there with your cup of coffee in the morning being like, this sucks. And I'm sad that they're moving. I'm happy for them that they're going after their dream, but this sucks. We're allowed to acknowledge that. And that's a simple one, but I wanted to prove these are happening all the time. On the other end, I spoke to someone this morning and we were talking about a friendship breakup that she's had with a friend of 26 years.
That's a long time. That's painful.
And
painful. Yeah.
She's I don't want to give away too much. She's years. It's over a year into this situation. And she's like, it still feels raw. It's like, yeah. Yeah. So it's just acknowledging whatever the grief is. It doesn't have to be huge. It can be small or big, but giving yourself a second to say, don't brush that aside.
I agree, because if somebody breaks up with a romantic partner, it's almost that we understand that that's the breakup and that's painful, and therefore that person probably needs a shoulder to cry on. You might need to take them a tub of ice cream round or a bottle of wine, and it might take some time. We might have to talk about this over and over again. But there isn't the same understanding about a friendship breakup, and I am seeing it all the time. I see it a lot on grief forums, actually, because I think it can be, unfortunately, the collateral damage out of grief sometimes, because it's when you're in that much pain, if you feel that somebody's let you down, all those sort of things can surface, or other things. But yeah, somebody losing a friend after 26 years, it's huge. And also, particularly, if we go back to what we've been talking about at the beginning, if you consider that person part of your chosen family, and then you lose them.
I was going to bring up that as well. I love that you brought that up. My belief is that, so our family, right? We believe like they are family. That's what a lot of people will say. And as somebody who doesn't have a strong family of origin situation, I really had to examine the beliefs that come along with that, because a lot of the societal narrative is, right, they will do anything for you. They will always put your interest first. They will always show up for you, whatever beliefs you hold. And the reality of my situation did not match those beliefs. That was one of the most painful things, is I had to examine it and be like, wow, this does not show up in my life the way it does in other people's. And so I use the family example because I think a lot of people just think that that one is a guarantee. And so for me, it's a reminder, like, any relationship can change. Nothing is guaranteed. And even our chosen family relationships are work, right? You can say that you will be someone's emergency contact, but if you don't show up in that scenario, then your actions don't match the belief that you have about this relationship, and that can really hurt people. So I guess my reminder here is, like, your actions matter. We can all say a lot of things, and saying them is important, I think, to help set the expectation. But in order to turn it into evidence, we actually need to act in that way. And for anybody that goes through that, who has like somebody that's chosen family, and in the end, they're not showing up in the way that you expected or they expected, that hurts. It hurts. And that's going to happen in small ways and in big ways in any relationship, even in our chosen family. I think that's part of the reason I like to be so clear about what I expect from my chosen family. And it doesn't need to be some big, like, sit down conversation. It could just be saying these things out loud, because it helps understand kind of what I expect from them and what they expect from me. Another example could be, I've talked a lot about like what I would expect of you, but I also can offer expectations. So an example of that would be for, we talked about godparents, and I was saying that I'm the bonus adult to a lot of kiddos. Now, I haven't stood up there in the church and, I guess, made this proclamation, but what I have done is looked at the parents and said things like, hey, I would always drop everything for your kid. Always. And that's me offering an expectation that, like, I'm willing to act on. Your kid can always call me, and I will always answer the phone or call them back as soon as I am possibly can.
This is such a good conversation. What would be your best advice to somebody, going back to the friend that you spoke about this morning, not to obviously go into detail with that friendship, but somebody's lost a friend that was their chosen family, 26 years. We said, yes, allow yourself to grieve it, allow yourself to accept that things have changed and that it is painful and that you're not going crazy. This is normal. It's a big thing. What would you advise somebody how they could mend or try and heal in a situation like that?
Well, I'm going to back up a little bit and just say to anybody who's listening to this, my number one tip for you is build it before you need it. So if you are out there and you have like one person you feel like is chosen family, and that's the only person you can call, putting all your eggs in one basket, I cannot tell you enough, like, don't do it. Build the community you need before you need it. Because if you are this person who lost a friend of 26 years that is your ride or die, your emergency contact, the person you expected to drop everything for you, and you have not built even a basic community. They don't have to be a bunch of other like really close friends or like a little trio or whatever. They don't have to be that. But if you don't have some other relationships that you feel like provide you some support and give you kind of this like web safety net, you're going to be, right, that's where the survival instinct kicks in. You're going to be panicked. Whether you realize it, whether like logically you understand what's going on or not, studies show that your body will react. So build it before you need it. Now, if you are this person that has lost this friendship of 26 years, I mean, I would say to you, like, really give yourself permission to grieve it. Like, societally, if you lost a romantic relationship of that period of time or a family relationship, what would you do, right? You'd allow yourself some time to lay on your couch and be lazy. You would cry about it maybe, or go to one of those, I don't know if these exist in the UK, but they're quite cathartic. So this is a business idea. They got to exist. But, go to one of those places where they provide you with a bunch of stuff and you can like take a bat to
Yes,
it.
yeah, we have axe throwing. Yeah, I've not been to one, but I quite like the idea. Yeah, we have these.
Let me
Yeah,
tell you, it is an emotion, like a full body release. Just allow yourself to feel whatever you're going to feel. The other thing I would tell people at some point when you are ready, this isn't going to be an immediate thing, is think about the things about that friendship that were positive, that you enjoyed, that you still want to have in your life. And because I think it can get easy to get caught up in the things you never want again. But as you go move through your day and through your communities and with your people, if you know what you want to add back into your life, then you can be on the lookout for relationships that provide that, because you deserve to have that back. And it may take you a little time to build it, but like better to be focused on what you want instead of so focused on what you never want again.
That's such good advice. I love it. Thank you. I'm hearing all that. It's giving me the shivers, but in all the right ways, because I can relate to it. The people that are no longer in my life anymore that were very important at one point, and I think through time, it's very similar to a romantic relationship. You can start to look back with fondness and just accept it. That hey, there may be more people coming. I hope there are. I love the idea of living abroad for a bit and trying something different. And the idea that there's people out there that I haven't even met yet that I could have a really brilliant connection with, and that maybe I could give something back too.
Let me give people a really specific example, because I feel like, what do you mean? Let's say, I can think of a friendship that ended. And the thing I loved the most about that friendship is it felt pretty spontaneous. Like, that friend was always somebody who really wanted to kind of just like, let's go have fun. Let's laugh. Let's decide on a whim to go into that place and dance for 20 minutes. We're not even going to spend our whole night there. We don't need to spend our whole night there to make it worth it. Just go in there for 20 minutes. And I really needed that energy. I can tap into that energy if I'm with someone else. I can kind of do it on my own, but it's not my natural inclination. And it really gave me like this freedom when we were together, and I loved it. So that is something very specific that I can look for when I meet people. And that doesn't mean that this new person I meet needs to become my nearest, dearest, closest present friend. They could be just somebody I end up kind of becoming like a dance party friend with. And I go with them to dance parties, and that adds that trait back into my life. And I knew that I was looking for that because I had done the reflection to realize it's something that I was now missing. Naturally, I think we just, especially in a friendship breakup, we know what we don't want again. That stands out pretty clearly. It's the work is finding the thing you want to add. The other thing I would say, just for anybody out there listening, is like, say you don't want the drama again. You definitely don't want that in those more present, more deeply connected friendships. But let's say my dancing friend that we just go out once a month and dance is very dramatic and the drama is all the things. But I literally just go out the last Friday of every month and we go dancing. Honestly, maybe the drama's fine. Maybe I walk out and I'm just like, okay, well, see you next month. maybe you can't navigate that, but I do think,
yeah,
just saying that, like, sometimes, like,
that's
I don't know.
great. I love. I feel like you're giving permission there in a way that we don't often hear, because everything's so out at the moment. Everything, the messages that seem to be coming across are all like, just get rid of the toxic people out of your life, get rid of the gaslighters, get rid of the narcissists, and all that. But nobody's one just saying, okay, that friend might be somebody that is brilliant to go out and listen to music with and dance to. Maybe they do have a touch of the drama and narcissism, but like you say, you don't have to get into their web, but you can tap into it.
That is, like, everybody can decide what they can tolerate. I'm not saying to do it if it doesn't feel right to you, but I agree. I think, right, like, we have these really mainstream messages of, like, black and white, like, do this or don't do this, cut out these people, cut out those people. And at the end of the day, we all have to live on this planet together. And if certain people are just completely shoved to the outskirts, like, that's part of the problem with the loneliness epidemic and things like that. We all have to be figuring out what we can tolerate. And you may not be able to tolerate any drama. Maybe you are just, like, too scarred from past relationships, and that is an absolute red flag for you. But maybe there's also a way that it really doesn't bother you, and that's okay. And you can just be really aware that, like, this friendship's probably never really going to progress past Friday nights dancing. But I really enjoy that piece of this friendship. So I'm just going to lean into that and allow it to be what it is.
I could really tap into that idea. I really can. I did want to ask something else, and it wasn't on my list of questions I sent you before, so I'll try and be quick with it. But
yeah, you're good.
I've been thinking while I've been talking to Alex. So I don't even mention this. I wear lots of different professional hats, creative hats, and one of them is my wedding photography and portrait photography business, which I've been doing for years. So I've been in the bridal prep room more times than I can imagine. I've seen
I was a wedding planner. Do you know that?
Oh, yeah.
I was a wedding planner for over a decade.
I knew I was stalking you, Alex. You see, I was attracted to somebody that had something similar to me. I tend to have a witchy vibe sometimes. I did not know that. But you probably, that's interesting, isn't it? We both had to survive to get our chosen family. And, maybe there are some steps you take in life that taps into these things. Who knows? That's quite interesting. Two things there for me that has come up in over the years when I've been in the bridal, because that's where all the interesting things happen. I find all the love, but all the interesting, and some of the painful things, some of the emotions. It all comes out. You're married. I was bridezilla. I'm not going to lie on that. I think I was the first one in. Yeah. For only about 5 minutes, but I did turn into bridezilla for about 5 minutes, and I totally put my hand up and admit that. But I was the first one. I was only 25. I was the first one to get married, and I just freaked out. But anyway, as a photographer, I've seen so many lovely things, most of it good. But I've seen a few scenarios where you can see that somebody who's been put in the bridesmaid role is really trying to steal the thunder, and there's the sisters coming in, and it's sort of all the characters on that stage are there in exactly where they're meant to be, and then you just press, get the orchestra up, and there we go, and you can see what happens. And I often hear afterwards that sometimes friendships can suffer a little bit from those intense situations.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I just wanted to sort of put out there, as in that I think that's quite an interesting one when we have big life milestones like that, and I see it, and you will have seen it as well. But also, really going back to you and your experience that I connect you with, there have been times when I've had to hold back a little bit of emotion myself, when I've seen really beautiful moments of origin family that come in really strongly in these moments. And there's been a bit of a touch of envy there for me. Have you ever experienced that a little bit as well? I'm being a bit bold asking you that, because you come across as somebody who's who's very mature like that. You don't seem to have held on to what you haven't got. You've always reached out for what I'm going to get. But I have had my moments of like, well, why was I not born in the Walton family, or that sort of thing? You don't. It's just, I'm only human, and I'm just going to be honest about it.
I am so beyond grateful for my chosen family, for my friends, that for the majority of like my day-to-day life, as I move through certain things or milestones, I'm just more grateful than I am mad. I think, and it's so funny because I talk about this on the internet, like no one can really understand what I have built for myself unless you're probably like one of my closest friends, and even they aren't going to quite understand. I put a lot of energy into it. It is truly wild. Like I am just mind blown constantly by what I have built. And I want to say, like, I don't think I'm special. I think I've just put a lot of energy here because it is truly, at the end of the day, like my main core value. It is the thing that everything else will fall below. Honestly, sometimes even my romantic relationship, right? Like that's part of it. But if that imploded, that, well, my husband and I are very happy. But if it did, right? I'm a realist. If it did, I would have my friends and I know they would show up for me. So I just really am so focused on that. Now, that's not to say that I'm never sad, especially in the moments where it happens is honestly probably like therapy, like where I'm really thinking solely about that relationship, then I'm sad. But if I'm just moving through my day, I'm looking over here, like there's a photo of a good chunk of my friend family at a wedding on my desk. The gratitude I have for that, I think eclipses everything
Your
else
cup
in
is
general.
overflowing from the sounds of it. Yeah. And I agree with you. I started switching or reframing the way I think in the last few months. The grief is, easing off and all that sort of thing. And yes, I've started to really practice that. Again, sounds a bit cheesy, but I really actually see the benefits of practicing gratitude of chosen family and seeing just how. But you're right to advise people that if you haven't had to survive in the way that you and I have had, and not to compare the circumstances, but everybody has their platforms or levels of it.
It's awful
exactly.
for all of us.
Yeah, we're all trying to survive. Come on. Then I think, finding your what you call front row people in times of crisis can help so much if the shit does hit the fan, if you don't mind me saying. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've nearly run out of time, and I know that it's daytime for you, and I'm sure you've probably got somebody to go and look after or support or save or just be brilliant you. It is about belonging, and I didn't feel like we had to overemphasize that word because everything that we're talking about absolutely aligns with that. But I do like to finish the episode asking my lovely guest, if I was to say to you, what does belonging really mean to you? It's probably everything you said in this episode, but is there something you'd like to add on that question?
Yeah. If I was going to boil down your question and try and give my simplest, most like succinct answer, it would be that belonging to me means trust. That at the end of the day, I think especially with friendships and community where there doesn't seem to be this like strong societal definition always of like what that means, building trust like in yourself that you have cultivated this community, building trust in your relationships that like they would also show up for you. That's belonging to me. And part of that is like trust in others, but part of that's also just trust in myself and my ability. Like one of the final thing I'll say here is like one of my biggest aha moments I've ever had in my life was a very large group of friends lived around me, right? It's like as if your siblings all lived around you. And 5 sets of friends told us that they were moving away in like a 6-month period. And I was devastated. I was so sad. I mean, I'm happy for them. So it's back to grief. I'm happy for them that they're going after their path. But I was sad, right? Because they won't be around in person as much. And I had this moment, I will never forget. I was standing there drinking my coffee, staring out the window, crying. And I was like, you know what? I've built it before and I can build it again. And if I want people that live near me, I can build those relationships, and they will just be additional people in my web to these other friends that have moved away, right? I can build this piece of friendship again for myself. And that's belonging to me, right? Like, it's like the ultimate trust. So that at the end of the day, I can always build the support system I need.
That's wonderful. And ultimately, it feels like what you're saying is because you belong to yourself when it comes down to it, but you spread all that love out and you create these webs of belonging around you. Oh, brilliant. Alexander, thank you so much for coming on How to Belong. I will put your website details. I know people would like to reach out to you and all those things that you talked about that are in the...
Please.
And you have a chat as well, do you? Is that right? You've got you set up a separate website where people can drop you messages, which I thought was absolutely fantastic as well. So you're really opening yourself up to people to be there. So
yeah, email, there's voice memos that you can find on my website, and I mean, any social media platform you can I message people from all over the world all the time, anywhere.
Oh, well, thank you. And I'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your day because I'm about to go to bed. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Naomi.